Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. So today's topic is training, and we're actually going to be discussing the bench press. So we're going to cover technique and some basic information. So recently, someone in the gym who does more like aesthetic-based training, like bodybuilding, body shaping type training, they went for a 1 rep max, and since they were kind of new to like pure strength-based kind of technique, they copied a couple things they saw in the gym or online and ended up asking kind of my opinion about it. So they had some kind of common mistakes that happened when they went for the heavy ones, and that's what I figured would prompt kind of a good podcast in the sense of covering what those mistakes are that most people make, and then what would be kind of proper kind of setup and some other concepts that would help people perform better and safer in the bench press. So, to go along with this podcast, we have a video on YouTube. So if you search Brutal Iron Gym Bench Press Technique and Basic Information, it's going to be around like 11-minute video, just going over like good setup, some concepts that most people get wrong, kind of picking like what's the right grip width, that kind of stuff. So some good kind of basic technique and setup things. So if you want to maximize your bench press for strength, there's some good information in there. So let's start with kind of going through the setup sequence. So everything I'm going to say will be shown, well, most things I say will be shown in that video on YouTube. So if you want to check that out, it'll be a good kind of reference to make this podcast either make more sense before you listen to the podcast or kind of help make more sense after the fact. But setting up, the sequence of setting up is typically we'd lay down underneath the bar, and there's a lot of detail. So I could very quickly just spend like an hour talking about this. I'm going to go fast through some things. So, and then if you want extra detail, you can always email us and we'll have an offer here at the end of the podcast for that. So you set up, and typically if you line up where your eyes are under the bar, that's a pretty good location in the sense that then when you're set up and you want to move the bar for the repetitions, you would pick the bar up and bring it out over your chest. So if the eyes are under the bar, that means you're close to the bar, so you can kind of get it up out of the J-cups and get it positioned over you correctly, where you have not too much space to kind of bring it out over, where you're kind of like, killing yourself trying to bring it over top of you. Or if you're too far under the bar, when you try to bench, it'll hit the J-cups. So having your eyes under the bar is a good place to start. Then we talk about, and we'll talk about here later too, is the next thing is getting your hands on the bar where you want them. So you put your hands on the bar, and we'll go over how do you decide that. Then you would actually use the bar as leverage and pull yourself up a little bit, and that picks up the upper body off the bench. You will then pinch your shoulder blades together and then put your upper body back down on the bench. So the idea of pinching the shoulder blades together would be the same feeling we would want to have at the end of a rowing exercise. So if I do like a seated cable row, as I would pull the handle towards me, I should be contracting my shoulder blades together, as if I'm trying to like pinch a pencil between my shoulder blades or trying to pinch something between my shoulder blades. So our shoulder blades should be pinched together, kind of like towards each other. That's the first thing we would set up with that sequence. In when we pick our upper body off the bench, we pinch together like we're ending a row, and then we put our upper body back down on the bench. What this does is this takes the shoulder blades and creates a flat surface that we would then be resting on in order to bring the bar out over top of us and start bench pressing with it. So by having the shoulder blades pulled together, it flattens out the surface of the shoulder blades, and it gives you a nice stable base to bench from. So this would just be like how when we're squatting, we want to have our feet flat on the floor. I wouldn't want my feet, like where only the inside edge of my foot was touching, but not the outside edge, or just the outside edge was touching, but not the inside edge. We'd want kind of the whole foot in contact with the ground. By pinching our shoulder blades together, that kind of creates the shoulder blades being the whole surface of the shoulder blade being on the bench press. So that's extremely important. Then we push through our feet and actually slide our body up the bench press. So this would actually be horizontally up, not vertically up. So we push ourselves up towards our head. And this is actually done with more of a leg extension type effort rather than a leg press. So rather than pushing through your heels, which causes your butt to lift up. You want to press like you're doing a leg extension, almost like you're trying to take your foot out the front side of your shoe. That will slide your body up the bench, but it will not pick your butt up. The point of sliding your body up the bench press is it then allows you to tighten your lats. So your lat muscles connect from your upper arm bone down to your hip. And what that's going to do is it's going to give us increased stability of our shoulder joint. So our shoulder blades being pulled together give us a flat surface to bench from. Then when we push through our feet to slide ourselves up the bench, we would then flex our lats really hard. And that's going to give us an increased stability in the shoulder joint. So when we want to contract our chest muscles and our triceps and pull off the shoulder joint to create the motion of a bench press, that shoulder joint will be stably in place, which gives us the best kind of chest and tricep contraction. So again, this kind of makes sense, as I would rather squat standing on concrete than I would squat standing on sand, right? So if I stand on concrete, I have a much more stable base for my feet, which is where the power is coming from. So I'm creating power through my legs to push the floor away from the bar, or push the bar away from the floor. It's kind of the same thing. So we're separating the bar from the floor. So I have to push through the floor to create that pressure. And if I have a nice, strong, stable surface to push from, more of my effort of pushing will go into the barbell, and less of it will be lost in stability issues. So if we don't have our lats tight when we bench press, we will not display our truest level of strength, because some of our strength power will be lost in stability issues rather than being transferred directly into the bar. So we want to have our shoulder blades pulled together, so that way there's a nice flat surface on the bench. We want to then push through our feet to create like a leg extension motion to slide our body up the bench, and that allows us to flex our lat. So we know if our lat connects to our upper arm to our hip, if I try to move my arm towards my hip, that's going to move me further away from the bar. And then also, whenever I have the bar in my hands and the bar is loaded into my body, I can't then slide my shoulders. So while we're bench pressing, in order to maintain a stable shoulder during multiple reps, we have to maintain tight lats. You can't pull your shoulder towards your hip to maintain a tight lat, because the shoulder will be like loaded by the weight of the barbell. So instead of pulling the shoulder towards the hip, you have to push the hip towards the shoulder in order to create tight lats. So that's very important. So that's going to be why we would slide ourselves up the bench, is it allows our hip to get closer to our upper arm, and that allows us to tighten our lats. Okay? So then from there, we want to make sure our feet are nice and flat, stable on the ground. Now, there are people who do kind of like a position on their toes, and there are people who've benched over 600 pounds on their toes. That's fine. So it's just you want to have a nice, stable surface to continue to create that push of the hips up into the upper arm to maintain tight lats. So if you can do that by just pushing through your toes and not having your heel on the ground, that's fine. If you want to have your whole foot on the ground to create that sensation, that's okay too. So in the world of strength training, one of the sports for that is powerlifting. And in some of the competitions of powerlifting, you have to have your entire foot on the ground. And in some of the competitions of powerlifting, they allow you to have just your toes on the ground. Your heel doesn't have to be down the ground. So all of them require you to have your foot on the ground and have kind of stable positioning. You're not allowed to like squirming around and sliding your feet around. But sometimes you have to have your heel down, sometimes you don't. Kind of depends on the organization that you do your competition through. So if you can create that leg extension pressure to slide your hip up towards your shoulder to maintain tight lats, whether you have your heel down or not, doesn't really matter as long as you can do that purpose of the leg pressure, okay? That's what you'd be using your foot for. So then, once we have all that in place, we then want to take a really big breath into our chest. So you actually should really make a big mouth open, kind of big air in. And there's sequencing of breathing that's really, you can get kind of like nitty gritty detail to where you do half of a breath started through the nose, and then you finish the second half through the mouth. So you could breathe in through your nose, There you go. So I don't know if you guys can hear that at all. So probably a ridiculous thing to try to do on audio. But you start through your nose, you finish through the mouth, but the idea is to get as much freaking air into your chest as you possibly can. So what that does is, again, it gives more stability to your body. So I use the analogy of if you have a can of soda. So if I want to try to crush the can, but the can is sealed and full of soda, good freaking luck. Okay? Good luck trying to crush that thing. However, if you pop the top, you let the air out, and you even pour the soda out, you can smash the can much easier. So if you get a big breath in, as much breath as you possibly can, that's like filling the can of soda. And it makes it much harder to crush. So the reason why that's important with our body is the more air we get in, the more resilient we are to the bar, kind of the weight of the bench press kind of pushing us around and causing us to lose position or to kind of flatten out muscles that we have contracted. It'll also expand your chest cavity, and there's a whole bunch of kind of caveats about how that improves stretch tension in your chest and yada, yada, yada. There's a lot of details here that I'm trying to go past. So, but the bigger air you get, the more power you will have, especially coming off the chest at the bottom of the bench press. So we would have a big breath in, we would unrack the bar, you'd bring it out over your chest. I usually encourage people to breathe a second time in that position. So they're not supposed to breathe out, okay, where they allow everything to become deflated. They would actually breathe in even more. Typically what happens when someone moves the bar from the J cups to out over their chest, they're going to lose some positioning, some tightness. So if they pause over their chest, try to breathe even more air in, it gives them a chance to flex anything that maybe got loose. The other benefit is if they go to a strength competition, at those competitions, you have to follow what are called lift commands. So when you bring the bar out over top of your chest, a judge who is going to judge your effort of bench pressing is going to wait and see if you are stable, if you have good control of the bar. Typically, that wait is long enough that if you tried holding your breath during it, you're going to get really high blood pressure. You're going to kind of just lose power and positioning because you're holding your breath for so damn long. So the bar gets kind of lifted out of the J-cups and placed over top of you at the top of the lockout. Then you kind of would wait until they say start. And they would not say start until they see that you have good position and control over the bar. You'll lower the bar down to your chest. When it touches your chest and it stays stable, as in you have full control, they'll then say press. You then push it up to the top at lockout, but then you have to wait for them to say rack. So what they're looking for is after you press it up, do you still have control of the bar? So if you just press it up and kind of throw it right back into the J-cups, they don't really know if you were really in control of that or not. So the lift commands at strength competitions are tests to see if you have control of the bar at all kind of phases of the lift. So if you are doing a bench press for strength, which is what this podcast is about, it's good for you to practice as if those commands are being called. So that way, if you ever go do a competition, you'll already have those behaviors and mechanics already set in place. So when you unrack the bar, you would pause, take in even more air and flex all the muscles again, and that would simulate the time it would take for them to give you the start command. You then bring the bar down, let it touch your chest, and you give like a 1 count pause. So it touches, you go 1, press, and then you push up. But you should not let the bar just come down and bounce off your chest or hit your chest and start throwing it right away. So that's just riding momentum. So the bar is going to kind of fall downward on you. It's going to hit you and then bounce up out of your rib cage. Really not good, okay, by the way. And it runs the risk of lots of injuries. So it's good for you to come down, have the bar pause on your chest for just 1 count, like just 1 press, and then push it right back up. And then the same thing when you get to the lockout of the press, pause for a second to ensure that you have control of the bar, and then put it back in the J-cups. So that's going to be the setup sequence. Is eyes under the bar, hands on the bar. Lift up to pinch your back, put it back down. Then you leg extend to slide your hips towards your shoulders and flex your lats. You then want to take a big breath, unrack the bar, take another big breath, then you bring the bar down to the chest, press it back up, and then you put it in the J-cups. So that's kind of the whole process of the bench press. And like I said, if this is hard to follow in audio, you can go check out YouTube. Just search Brutal Iron Gym bench press technique and basic information. And that 11-minute video will be up there. So that's kind of the whole process and what we go through. And we talked a little bit about like the importance of the shoulder blade position, so that way we have a nice flat surface to bench from, and we have a nice stable, good braced shoulder joint to contract our working muscles through. Now, hand placement. So on a barbell, the inside most rings, sometimes, and you'll see what I mean by the rings is there are things that are a little bit like wider than your shoulders. There's just a bald spot in the knurling, which is the spiky stuff of a barbell. There's a bald spot in the bar that looks like a ring. And what that is the inside most ring. If the bar has two rings, the outside one is for Olympic lifting reference. The inside ring is for powerlifting. If the bar only has one ring, then it's a powerlifting ring. Unless you're actually trying to bench with an Olympic lifting bar, which I doubt you are. So if it's one ring, most likely it's a powerlifting ring. So that ring is in reference. That ring has to be, you can't be any wider than that ring when you bench press. So the ring has to be covered if you're going to try to go wide. So you have to at least have your pointer finger on the ring. If you have your hand any wider than that and the judges can see the ring of the bar, that's deemed too wide. So that's outside of the rules of strength training. You wouldn't really want your hands much wider than that anyhow because you're going to tear your pec or hurt your bicep. So it is hard to have good stability and bracing like ultra wide. So you would have your pointer finger on the ring, or you could bring your hands inward from there. So some people bench with their pointer finger on the ring, middle finger on the ring on the ring, pinky on the ring. Sometimes people even be a finger or two width narrower than that ring. So you can come inside the ring if you want, you just can't go outside the ring. How you know proper hand placement is if your hands are too wide. As you come down on the bench press, especially towards the bottom half, you'll feel a strain in the outside of your chest muscles, the ones out by your armpit, or the upper part of your bicep. It'll just feel really uncomfortable, and or you'll have a hard time having your shoulders feel stable. So even if your shoulder blades are pulled in together, even if your hips are pulled up towards your shoulder and your lats are tight, you'll just feel it's kind of like an exposed position for the armpit. So that'll give you an idea that it's too wide. It feels kind of risky and negative for the muscles of the armpit. If your grip is too narrow, what you'll feel is as you come down to the chest, you'll be able to come all the way down, but when you go to push, you might get the bar maybe 2-3 inches up off your chest, but it kind of stalls out and you feel like you have no power in the middle of the bench press. Okay, the middle of the range of motion. So that's how you might know if it's too narrow. So how do you know if it's just right? You would have maybe some stretch tension in the chest, but it feels like a good blend of involvement of the triceps and the arm muscles and everything. There doesn't feel like a single muscle that's really singled out and at most risk of injury or workload. Then as you go to press up, it kind of feels like you have kind of decent continual power throughout the full range of motion. If you're not sure, take your hands wider than where you're at, see if it gives you that exposure feeling in the armpit, or take your hands narrower than where you're at and see if it feels like it stalls out on the way up. So you might have to play around with your hand position to find which one is best for you. So I personally like having my ring finger on the ring. Now, even though I'm 6 foot tall, I have relatively short upper arms for a 6 foot tall person. So it would almost be like I had short arms for my height. And I feel like the ring on the ring gives me that blend of everything involved, and I don't feel like anything's overly exposed. I feel nice and strong. Now, I've tried my pointer finger on the ring, but it feels like it exposes my chest. Doesn't feel stable and comfortable in my shoulders either. I've tried my hands narrower than that, and I feel just an overwhelming involvement in my triceps, really no chest involvement, and I kind of lose power in the middle of the range of motion. So you just have to play around with that and see what works for you. Okay? So the other thing you'll hear people talk about is arching of their back. So when they lay down on the bench, what they really want to have is their upper back is on the bench. But if you were to slide, as we say, to push through your feet and slide your butt, your hips, up towards your shoulders so that way you can flex your lats. You'll find that that brings your mid-back, kind of like your lower back area, the area from your butt to the bottom of your shoulder blades, that'll bring that area up off the bench. So it'll actually create a little, what's called like a little bit of an arch. So you have your shoulders touching, your butt touching, and your feet touching. Obviously, your feet are on the ground, not on the bench. But your shoulders are on the bench, your butt's on the bench, and your feet are on the floor. So those are the three areas you want touching. Everything else in your back should actually be up off the bench because you're trying to flex your lats. So that's going to cause the lower back to lift up off the bench. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. You will not have any risk of injury. You're actually more at risk of injury if you don't have your lats tight. So how much arch you need really is just whatever you need to get your lats to feel tight. Some people are more flexible, so they're going to be able to have bigger arches than other people. So it's kind of a personal thing. There isn't like the most arch you get is the most strong you are. There are tons and tons of males and females I've worked with where we had to take some of their arch away because they were just getting themselves in a kind of a coiled up position, but it was actually more arched than what they would have needed to actually keep their lats tight. They were just arching and flexing their lower back really hard. We don't want that. That's just really uncomfortable. We want enough of an arch to flex our lats really hard, not your lower back. So that's going to be a personal preference. There isn't a one-size-fits-all kind of cue of that. Really, the best way to think of it is once I have my shoulder blades pulled together, if I push through my feet like a leg extension and I slide my butt up towards my shoulders, I'm going to bow like my belly up towards the ceiling a little bit, so you will create some arch, and then you're going to flex your lats really hard. Wherever the lats feel maximally contracted is where your arch should be. If you bring your butt continually up towards your shoulders and you have yourself almost like wrapped around like a circle, but you don't feel tight lats, then that amount of arch is not necessary. So again, you don't want to contract in your lower back, you want to contract in your lats. Okay? So the common mistakes that we'll see people make is they won't get a big breath in. So they'll kind of get themselves in good position, but they just unrack the bar, but they kind of forget to get a big breath in. And again, we talked about the big breath keeps you safe, keeps you more stable, and it actually gives you more power out of the bottom of the bench press because it increases the stretch tension on the working muscles by having your chest capacity full of air. Okay? The other mistake we commonly see is people will lose tightness either intentionally or accidentally. So as they bring the bar down, even if they're trying, like say at the start of the press, they unracked the bar and they were really paying attention to their body being tight, but then as they brought the bar down, they kind of forgot to pay attention to that. They're just like, where's the bar at? And they're not really paying attention anymore to what their body's doing. Their body will start to lose tightness. So their lats will start to relax. Maybe their legs, that pressure they're creating through their legs is going to relax. So typically how you know your body is tight is everything is flexed. So since you're pushing through your feet in a leg extension manner to push your hips up towards your shoulders, your calves are going to often be flexed, your thighs are going to be flexed, your glutes are going to be flexed. So your glutes will be lightly touching the bench, but they should actually be flexed. So your butt should not be mush when you bench press. Your butt should be flexed really hard. So every muscle in your body should be flexed. Now, we did say in the arch, the emphasis is your lats being tight, not just your lower back. But your lower back will be kind of like flexed tight-ish, but it's not the main focus, whereas you're trying to focus on your lats more. So everything in the body is going to be flexed and tight. So you want to maintain that tightness as the bar comes down to you. So you can stay in the best position, have it touch your chest, and then push the bar back up, and at no point should you allow your body to relax. Now, that can sometimes happen accidentally if we don't pay attention to it. And then sometimes people will do it on purpose, thinking it gives them more power out of the bottom. So as they bring the bar down to their chest, they'll kind of like let their chest cave in. They'll set the bar on themselves, then they try to throw their chest up as they try to throw the bar. That's really dangerous. It really undoes a lot of healthy positioning of your shoulder. They're going to run into what's called AC joint, where the outside of their collarbone in their shoulder joint, there's a small little kind of like connective tissue we have that can be strained when you don't have proper position maintained in the bench press. So they'll kind of explain like they just have pain under the front side of their shoulder. So that's typically AC joint pain, and it typically comes from improper positioning. They either allowed their position to loosen and that connective tissue had to take stress, or they have poor thoracic mobility and they can't get really good shoulder blade positioning, and that's causing the stress. But you should not allow your upper body to kind of cave in to accept the weight of the bar and then try to throw your upper body back into the bar. You'll see people do that, and they'll get decent levels of strength, but they're going to plateau very quickly because they're losing the base of their strength and or they're risking injury. So it's something that doesn't, show itself right away as a negative, but it definitely is in the long run. And then often people, when they're really strong, even though they're maintaining tightness as much as they can, if they lower a 400 plus pound bar onto their chest, it's going to look like their chest caves down. And it does. But they're not allowing that to happen. It's just the weight is so dang heavy it's happening. So you want to maintain body position tightness at all times, all times. And that even includes, like we said, your legs. So the calves, the thighs, the glutes, everything should be flexed and in that leg extension type effort rather than a press through the heel. So if you're pressing through your heel, it's going to push your butt up off the bench. If you press in a leg extension fashion, it's going to keep your butt on the bench, but keep your pressure up into your shoulders so that we can keep your lats tight. Okay? So we're almost done here. I'm trying to keep it under 30 minutes. The last thing people make mistake of is bad wrist position. So your wrist should be straight to where the back of your hand kind of follows a similar line as the forearm. Now, it's not going to be perfectly straight because the bar would roll off your thumb. But you definitely should not have your wrist kinked back like a 90-degree angle. So you want to have your wrist pretty straight as if you're punching someone, not where your wrist is bent and uncomfortable. So that will decrease power and just be painful. So we don't want either one of those. So we have a video on our YouTube channel. If you search Brutal Iron Gym wrist wraps, okay? We have a video of me explaining how to put on wrist wraps, and that explains also the concept of a straight wrist. Okay, that's going to give you the most power. Do you have to use wrist wraps? No, you don't. But if you find your wrists are kind of caving backward and you're having pain in the backside of your wrist or you have pain in your forearms, that might be a good idea to kind of use them. And especially if you're going from max effort weight, it's a good idea to kind of support your joints. It's allowed. It's totally fine. And over time, the muscle tissue will still strengthen, even though it's being slightly protected. Okay? So you can go to YouTube, search Brutal Iron Gym wrist wraps. Okay, so I'm trying to make this under 30 minutes, but a good basic kind of understanding of the bench press technique and why certain things are important, such as shoulder blade positioning, or hand positioning, breathing, stuff like that, okay? So as a service through the gym, I work with people online, like online clients. And a lot of them are like personal trainers. Actually, half of my clients are personal trainers. And a lot of them are strength athletes and just even general people who want to look good and they like the idea of bench pressing. So we keep that in their training routine. I do have tons of people who don't bench press. But a lot of people do like it, and we have it more so than we don't have it in people's training. So part of that with online clients is they send me videos through Instagram, Facebook Messenger, text message, stuff like that. And we check in every week. And I try to give them pointers and tips and things to address. I also check and see how they're moving and see what type of accessory movements we might need to emphasize on our next cycle of training to get them to their next PR of strength or muscular development. So part of that, like I said, is watching videos. If you would like help, if you like the idea of this bench press podcast, and you go on our YouTube and you watch the video, Brutal Iron Gym Bench Press Technique and Basic Information, and you want feedback for your bench press, email us at brutalirongym@gmail.com, okay? Or find us on Instagram under Brutal Iron Gym and send us a video of you bench pressing. I will give you feedback, okay? So it might take me a week or two, so depends on how many people send it, and I have my own workload of clients and stuff. But I sincerely appreciate you listening to this podcast. So we're 29 minutes and 20 seconds into it, and I sincerely appreciate you investing the time, and I really want to make sure that you learn how to bench press safely so you can get the best results, be happy in your training, take your physical health happiness so you can then have emotional, mental, and regular, just all-around life happiness. So to help you do that, I am absolutely incredibly excited and grateful if you were to take me up on the opportunity to send me videos of you bench pressing. Okay? So send a video from the side or from kind of like a 3/4 from the front view. You don't have to do a crotch shot view. That's not really that helpful. Okay. So every once in a while, I'll have clients do it so I can look at their wrist positions and forearm positions and stuff. But if you're going to pick an angle, please pick a side view. So makes it less awkward for me. But send a side view of you bench pressing. I'll give you a couple little tips and give you some ideas on how to progress or maybe some things to address. Okay? So if you like that idea, please send it to us at brutalirongym@gmail.com. If the video is too large for that, find us on Instagram under Brutal Iron Gym and send it there. Okay? So thank you for listening to this. I really hope it helps. If you have any questions whatsoever about bench press or anything else, just email us brutalirongym@gmail.com. Okay, thank you very much for listening to this. I truly hope it helped. Cool. Okay, if you like the podcast, please share it with family and friends. The more people we help, the happier the world will be. Also, if you like this information, you can find more from us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Brutal Iron Gym. And if you have any questions, feedback, or suggestions, we'd love to hear from you. The podcast is for you, so we want to know what you want to learn about. You can tell us at our email at brutalirongym@gmail.com. Okay, as always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening. And thank you for watching.